The Star Trek fictional universe contains a variety of weapons, ranging from missiles to melee. Energy weapons. A directed energy weapon emits energy in a named direction without the means of a projectile. It transfers energy to a target for a desired effect. Intended effects may be non-lethal or lethal. For example, in Star Trek, a hand phaser can be set to stun, or kill. Laser. Lasers are a sidearm in the original Star Trek pilot The Cage, and laser pistols appear in several original series episodes, although later episodes in the Next Generation seem to indicate that the laser's use as a weapon was outdated. In one instance, the ship-mounted lasers of two spacecraft were incapable of overcoming even the navigational shields of the USS Enterprise D, though on at least two other occasions it was threatened with destruction by laser-armed spacecraft. The Borg cutter weapon is a laser, as mentioned in the Star Trek, The Next Generation episode Q-Who, and is apparently incapable of directly penetrating Federation shielding. According to The Making of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry claimed that production staff realized that using laser technology would cause problems in the future as people came to understand what lasers could and could not do. This resulted in the move to phasers on screen, while letting lasers be known as a more primitive weapon style. Pulse cannon. When the laser had reached its upper limits of power, a new weapon was invented at Jupiter Station for the newly designed NX class. This new weapon could fire much greater energies at longer range, but the drawback was that continuous fire would cause damage to the emitter. To solve this problem, Starfleet scientists devised a way to fire the weapon in short pulsed burst streams to help regulate the temperatures of the emitters in a state of constant fire. The pulse cannon is a rather simple particle beam weapon, and Starfleet Command ultimately decided on using the more powerful plasma cannon on the NX-class Enterprise. The pulse cannon was nevertheless considered an effective energy weapon at the time and was adopted by many private craft such as freighters and privateers due to its lower cost of implementation. Plasma cannon. Plasma cannons are a form of directed energy weaponry used by both Earth Starfleet and the early Romulan Star Empire. On Starfleet vessels, they were the precursors to phase cannons. Plasma cannons fired a plasma discharge in the form of a beam or a burst similar to the plasma bullets fired by handheld plasma weapons, but much bigger in size. The NX class was initially armed with plasma cannons. Phase cannon. Phase cannons are 22nd century weapons, several of which first appear mounted to the Enterprise in the Star Trek Enterprise episode Silent Enemy. Phase cannons have a variable yield, with the cannons on the Enterprise being rated for a maximum output of 500 gigajoules, about 120 tons TNT equivalent. Phase cannons are generally more powerful than spatial torpedoes. They are the 22nd century precursor to phaser technology. Phase pistols are hand-carried phase cannons, and are also the 22nd century precursor to phaser technology. However, unlike phasers, they do not have the normal 16 power settings or a variable beam width or only stun and kill. Phaser. Phasers are common particle beam weapons first seen in the original Star Trek series and later seen or referenced in almost all subsequent films and television spin-offs. Phasers come in a wide range of sizes, ranging from handheld versions to starship-mounted ones. Personal phasers can be made small enough to fit in the user's palm and still be deadly. Larger and more powerful phaser rifles are commonly issued to security personnel. Phaser beams can be adjusted in both width and output. A typical hand phaser has different power settings so that it can merely stun living organisms, or completely disintegrate them. The beam can be adjusted to strike multiple targets at once or evenly destroy large amounts of material. A starship's phasers can be used as an anti-missile defense to destroy incoming projectiles. They can be used as welding torches or cutting tools, and can create heat sources by firing at a large, solid object. Phasers can be set to overload, whereby they build up a force chamber explosion by continuously generating energy without releasing it. The resulting blast can destroy most natural objects within a 50-meter radius. The overload process is marked by a distinctive sound that increases in volume and frequency until it is deactivated or it detonates. Ship-mounted phasers have a similar range of functions on a larger scale. The phasers on the USS Enterprise could stun entire city blocks full of people, destroy cities, and even destroy entire asteroids up to a given size. The ship's phaser system was also said to be capable of destroying continents. There are several types of phasers used by Starfleet and the United Federation of Planets. According to production notes from Star Trek, the original series, the phaser was originally a photon maser, because at the time of writing the laser was a relatively unknown. Masers, on the other hand, were already established and produced long-range coherent beams of electromagnetic radiation. The term phaser has since been revised as a backronym for phased energy rectifier, though from a physics standpoint even this is of equal semantic content. Ordinary incoherent light is not rectified, or synchronous, whereas lasing and masing emissions are rectified, or synchronous. Phasers release a beam of fictional subatomic particles called rapid nadions, which are then refracted through superconducting crystals. Given the nature of photons, the first acronym seems more accurate. The Star Trek, The Next Generation technical manual indicates that the superconducting crystals used in phasers are called Fushigi no Yumi, which is Japanese for Sea of Mystery, and the phrase is written a micro a registered trademark a micron in the original glyphs. This was a homage to the 1990 anime series Fushigi no Yumi no Nadia, known in North America as Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. The phasers that appeared in the 2009 reboot Star Trek appear similar to classic phasers, but fire bolts of energy instead of sustained beams, and seem to only have two settings, stun and kill. The barrel of the weapon is two-sided, and the user must literally rotate to a different output to use a different setting. It is not known whether or not the type of phaser has adjustable power output. A similar change was seen in the Starship-mounted phaser banks, which also fire bolts instead of beams. A phaser rifle prop from Where No Man Has Gone Before sold at auction for $231,000. A phaser pistol prop from Star Trek will be sold at auction starting at $60,000. Disruptor Disruptors are employed by several alien species in this series, including Romulans, Klingons, Breen, Cardassians, Iridians and Orions in their personal and military small arms as well as being mounted as cannon, emitters, turrets, and banks. Only the first three species are known to have Type 3 disruptors, the most advanced type developed so far, by the 24th century. Disruptors cause damage by exciting the molecular bonds of targets to such great extents that those bonds are weakened, and/or broken, by the energies emitted. According to Last Unicorn's Star Trek, The Next Generation role-playing game, disruptors are considered less elegant than phaser-based weapons. Their effects there are described as thermal shock and blunt force, as opposed to the rapid nadion effect. As a result, disruptors inflict more damage to matter, but less damage to shields, than phasers inflict. Phased polaron cannon Phased polaron cannons are the primary armament of the Dominion, the main antagonist faction in the later seasons of Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. The cannon emits a beam of polaron particles, the fictional in-universe antimatter counterpart of the muon. When first introduced, Dominion polaron cannons easily penetrate the shielding systems of most Alpha Quadrant races. The Alpha Quadrant races eventually learned to modify their shields to resist polaron weaponry, evoking surprise from the Vorta advisor Weoon. Tetion cannon Tetion cannons are the primary armament of the Hergen and are similar in application to phasers and disruptors. Tetion cannons are unique in that they are designed primarily to damage energy and force fields such as starship shields. Tetion cannons do damage matter but not to the same extent as phasers or disruptors. This is in line with the Hergen philosophy of the hunt. The Hergen ship would therefore knock out its opponent's shields and beam over hunters to engage in face-to-face ranged or melee combat. This allows the Hergen hunters to collect items that they would consider to be hunting trophies. Varon T disruptor Varon T disruptors were featured in the Star Trek, The Next Generation episode The Most Toys, and were mentioned to be a rare type of disruptor made illegal in the Federation because of their slow, excruciating method of killing. the weapons tear the body apart from the inside. Kiev Fajo, a Zybalian trader in that episode, owned 4 of the 5 Varon T disruptors ever manufactured and even used one on his own crew before his collection of rare items was confiscated after his capture and arrest for kidnapping and theft. Ferengi Energy Whip the Ferengi Energy Whip, as seen in the TNG episode The Last Outpost, looks and handles like a typical Earth bullwhip and discharges a powerful phaser-like energy pulse. Projectile weapons Spatial torpedo also referred to as conventional torpedoes. Spatial torpedoes are 22nd century weapons used by Enterprise. Spatial torpedoes are the ship's most powerful and primary ship-to-ship weapon before the installation of phase cannons. Spatial torpedoes are themselves superseded by more powerful photonic torpedoes. Unlike photonic torpedoes or any of the warhead's successors, spatial torpedoes are launched at sublight velocity and can be used much in the manner of a missile, having the warhead on a fly-by-wire. Photon torpedo Photon torpedoes are a standard ship-based weapon armed with an antimatter warhead. They are present in every version of the Star Trek series and are a standard weapon on almost every Federation ship, though in Star Trek, Enterprise, the titular ship uses less powerful spatial torpedoes until receiving the more powerful photonic variant, though this does not square with established canon because it took place before the Romulan Wars in which, to quote Spock in Balance of Terror, this conflict was fought by our standards today with primitive atomic weapons. Photon torpedoes first appear on a Starfleet ship in the original series episode Arena as part of the USS Enterprise S Armamenta in the Star Trek Enterprise episode The Expanse. The Enterprise first receives photonic torpedoes. Smaller Starfleet craft such as shuttlecraft and runabouts can be armed with micro-torpedoes, a scaled-down version of photon torpedoes designed for use on craft too small to accommodate the full-sized weapon. When fired, photon torpedoes usually appear as a spiky orb of energy of varying colors, such as red, orange, yellow, blue, or green, or in the case of the original series, red bolts. According to the original notes to TOS and the making of Star Trek, photon torpedoes are energy shielded to allow armor penetration. Several episodes seem to suggest this. The energy output of a photon torpedo, according to the technical manuals, is a maximum theoretical yield of 25 isotons and a maximum rated yield of 18.5 isotons. According to the TNG technical manual, photon torpedoes use 1.5 kilograms of matter and 1.5 kilograms of antimatter. However, these amounts would only produce an explosive yield of 690 gigatons, so a secondary effect must occur to achieve the incredible yields seen on screen. In the TOS episode, Balance of Terror, photon torpedoes apparently replaced nuclear warheads as the primary wartime weapons on Federation starships. The photon torpedo was seen to explode with great force. Later, in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, the explosive effects of the photon torpedo were significantly reduced. Torpedoes are often depicted as being easy to modify to suit specific situations. Despite the stated maximum yield, torpedoes can apparently be made far more destructive with relatively little effort. In Star Trek, Voyager, Tuvok and Kim modify a normal photon torpedo with a gravimetric charge, a Borg technology, to increase its destructive yield to 54 isotons. Kim comments that 50 isotons would have been sufficient to destroy a small planet. Janeway later instructs them to increase its yield even further, to 80 isotons. It is not specified exactly how they modified the warhead, but they only required a few hours to complete the work using materials readily available on Voyager. In Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Spock and Dr. McCoy modify a photon torpedo to track the plasma emissions from a cloaked Klingon bird of prey as it attacks the Enterprise A and the Excelsior, similar to the principal function of the heat-seeking missile. Photon torpedo launchers aboard ships are shown to be versatile enough to fire probes, which in universe are designed with this functionality in mind. In Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, A torpedo casing is used as a makeshift coffin for burial in space and as scientific probes as in the Next Generation episode In Theory, and Star Trek Generations. Also in the Next Generation episode The Emissary, a photon torpedo casing was used to convey Klingon Ambassador Kaya to the USS Enterprise when no other long-range transport was available. Plasma torpedo Plasma torpedoes are used by the Romulans, Cardassians, and the Gorn. The damage of a plasma torpedo spreads out over several ship systems at once, but the torpedo loses its effectiveness after only a few minutes of travel. Romulan plasma torpedoes use trilithium isotopes in their warheads. Gravimetric torpedoes Gravimetric torpedoes are torpedoes used by the Borg. The weapon emits a complex phase variance of gravitons to create a gravimetric distortion capable of tearing starships apart. Quantum torpedo Quantum torpedoes first appear in the Deep Space Nine episode Defiant as a weapon aboard the USS Defiant. Additionally, the USS Enterprise E is equipped with quantum torpedoes in Star Trek, First Contact and Star Trek, Nemesis. The Star Trek, Deep Space Nine technical manual states that quantum torpedoes derive their destructive power from zero-point energy. In the DS9 episode Paradise Lost, the USS Lakota was also stated to be carrying quantum torpedoes, although they were never used. 4 of the USS Enterprise-E's quantum torpedoes destroyed an unshielded Borg sphere. The launcher appears on the 1701E in Star Trek, Insurrection but is never fired. In Star Trek, Nemesis, 9 of the Enterprise-E's quantum torpedoes disabled Scimitar Euro's cloaking function. Quantum torpedoes are normally shown in a shade of blue. As of Nemesis, the Enterprise, the Lakota, the Valiant, the Defiant, and the unmanned spacecraft Dreadnought were the only ships known to be equipped with quantum torpedoes. Polaron torpedo Polaron torpedoes, like the Dominion weapon, are capable of penetrating normal shielding with ease. They appear in various Star Trek games. In Starfleet Command 3, it is one of the Klingons' 3 heavy weapon options, the others being the photon torpedo and the ion cannon. It also appears in Star Trek, Armada and Star Trek, Armada 2, as a researchable weapon for the Klingon Empire exclusive to the Vacha-class cruiser which takes out one of the targeted ship's systems at random. Transphasic torpedo Transphasic torpedoes appear only once, in the Voyager series finale, Endgame. They are high-yield torpedoes that are designed specifically to fight the Borg. The future Admiral Janeway brought them back in time in a Federation shuttlecraft and had them installed on board Voyager in 2378. They are among the most powerful weapons used in the Star Trek universe. Just one is capable of obliterating an entire Borg cube, a feat normally requiring an almost impossible amount of punishment using standard Federation weapons. They work by phasing out of normal space, traveling through a target and then rephasing back into normal space. Although they did not appear in the film Nemesis, according to the non-canon Destiny book trilogy, these were in fact kept by Starfleet as the weapon of last resort to be deployed to starships only when all else had failed against the Borg. They were the one and only thing Starfleet knew the Borg had not yet adapted to and for that reason wanted to keep this ace in the hole for as long as possible. Eventually, the situation became dire enough that the specifications were released to Federation and Klingon ships. The Borg eventually learned to adapt to them. Isokinetic cannon The isokinetic cannon was seen in only one episode of Star Trek, Voyager, Retrospect. Voyager met with a weapons trader and designer known as Corvin. It destroyed a target buoy composed of 10 m thick solid monotanium with a chromoelectric force field in one shot, coring it cleanly through. However, Corvin was killed before the installation of the weapon. Though the weapon was never known to have been removed from Voyager, it was never seen in use nor referred to again. TR-116 projectile rifle The Trail-116 projectile rifle is a prototype weapon developed by the Federation for situations where conventional energy weapons might be rendered useless by damping fields or other countermeasures. It is essentially a conventional rifle, but with a rather futuristic visual style. It is introduced in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode Field of Fire, where it is used in conjunction with a microtransporter and a visual scanner headpiece to create an extremely potent sniper rifle. With the scanner, the shooter can precisely target people hundreds of meters away and through solid matter with no difficulty. Using the transporter attached to the barrel, the slug can then be transported at full velocity, materializing at point-blank range. Phased plasma torpedo phased plasma torpedoes can phase out of normal space-time to bypass shields, then phase back in to detonate on a ship's hull, thus making shields worthless against them. They only appeared in the PC game Star Trek Bridge Commander. Shortly after the recovery of the Pegasus device, the phasing properties used in the design was seen as a delivery system for torpedoes. Since Borg ships are almost impossible to destroy by Starfleet's current technology, it made sense to their engineers to design a torpedo that could phase itself and enter the body of a Borg cube, causing devastating damage. However, reducing the size of the phasing coils used to accomplish an intangible state proved difficult. Further, the antimatter within the warhead had a destabilizing effect on the phasing coil. A new kind of explosive material was needed, and it was found using the principles behind the first observed Romulan plasma weapons. The installation of a high-energy plasma infuser would allow a torpedo casing to be filled with a warhead charged with high-energy plasma from the ship's warp nacelles. Warp plasma is highly unstable and can be easily detonated. Until recently, it was considered an undeliverable medium that could not be controlled. However, using an nanite-controlled trigger for reactant release now allows vessels to deliver a high-energy plasma warhead payload within a Mark IV torpedo casing. Chronoton torpedo Chronoton torpedoes are a unique form of weapon employed by the Krenim. The weapons phase in and out of normal time, allowing them to pass through ordinary shields and directly damage a vessel's hull. Though quite dangerous, their reliability is not absolute, as 7 of 9 and Tuvok find an undetonated Chronoton torpedo lodged in Voyager Euro's hull, which in turn allowed the crew to adapt the shields to withstand further attacks. Positron torpedo The Kessok are a highly intelligent race that allied themselves with the Cardassians, albeit through deceit, in the video game Star Trek Bridge Commander. They utilize positron torpedoes, powerful, slow-moving projectiles able to inflict nearly twice as much damage as quantum torpedoes. Biological, radioactive, and chemical weapons. Thalaron radiation Thalaron radiation was first used in the feature film Star Trek Nemesis by the villain Shinzon to assassinate the entire Romulan Senate. Later in the movie, Shinzon attempts to kill the crew of the USS Enterprise E using a ship-mounted version. Thalaron radiation, even in small amounts, petrifies living tissue almost instantly. Its properties also allow its range and area of effect to be precisely controlled, from encompassing a single room to engulfing an entire planet. Its massive destructive potential leads the Federation to consider it a biogenic weapon, and an extremely illegal one at that. It later features prominently in the plot of Homecoming, the Star Trek New Frontier short story in the 2008 Mirror Universe anthology Shards and Shadows, in which the rebels managed to steal a Romulan Thalaron bomb intended for use by the Alliance, to strike a balance of power against them. Metreon Cascade The Metreon Cascade was designed by Dr. Maybert Jetrel of the Hyconian Order. Unstable Metreon isotopes were used to create a devastating explosion, with radiation effects similar to those of the 20th century atomic bomb. Those not killed or vaporized in the initial blast suffered terrible radiation poisoning and death in the aftermath. It was used only once, on the Talaxian moon Rhinax in 2355. Trilithium resin Trilithium resin is a byproduct of a starship's warp engines that is lethal to humans, but harmless to Cardassians. A team of terrorists attempted to steal trilithium resin from the warp core of the Enterprise D when it was docked at Arcaria Station to receive a Barian sweep. Captain Benjamin Sisko would later use a trilithium resin torpedo to render Amaki planet uninhabitable to all human life for 50 years by detonating it in the atmosphere. Cobalt diselenide equals. Cobalt diselenide is a biogenic weapon that affects the nervous system. It is composed of selenium and rhodium nitrates. It is the counterpart to trilithium resin, being lethal to Cardassians but harmless to most other humanoids. Aston assimilators. Aston assimilators are used to absorb energy from other sources and then redirect it back as hazardous radiation. Melee weapons. Federation. Ka-bar combat knife. The Ka-bar combat knife is the Federation's standard-issue combat and survival knife. It is 32.5 centimeters and is standard equipment in survival gear and in emergency weapons caches aboard starships. Captain Catherine Janeway uses one in the Star Trek Voyager episode Macrocosm. In the real world, the Ka-bar is an official combat knife of the United States Marine Corps. Katana. A katana is a Federation sword of Japanese origin. The only major difference compared to the old sword of today is that the Star Trek version is foldable, thus occupying a minimum space when carried and stored. In the 2009 Star Trek reboot, Lieutenant Hikaru Sulu produces a folding katana with which to cut the lines of his parachute, having stated just before this that his hand-to-hand combat expertise is in fencing. Jemadar. Bayonet. The Jemadar often have bayonets attached to their plasma rifles. They employ these in close combat or to execute prisoners. Katakin. These straight-bladed polearms are used by the Jemadar in close combat. They were used by both Starfleet officers and Jemadar in the Star Trek Deep Space Nine episode To the Death. The Katakin bear a resemblance to the Bardic axe. Klingon. Bat'leth. The Bat'leth is the Klingon double-sided scimitar hook-sword deer-horn knives hybrid edge weapon, designed by martial arts enthusiast and Star Trek The Next Generation effects producer Dan Curry. The Bat'leth is a curved blade with spiked protrusions and handholds along the middle of the blade's back. In battle, the handholds are used to twirl and spin the blade rapidly. Klingon oral history holds that the first Bat'leth was forged around 625 AD by Karlus, who dropped a lock of his hair into the lava from the Kreestak volcano, then plunged the fiery lock into the lake of Lursa and twisted it to form a blade. After forging the weapon, he used it to defeat the tyrant Muller, and in doing so united the Klingon homeworld. This first Bat'leth was known as the Sword of Karlus and was stolen by the invading Hura. An episode of Deep Space Nine revolves around an effort to recover the Sword of Karlus. The name Bat'leth itself is a slight corruption of Batleth, which means Sword of Honor in Klingon. A replica Bat'leth was among the blades surrendered to British police as part of the 2006 knife amnesty. A Valdris blade was used in Colorado Springs, Colorado, in 2 7/11 armed robberies in 2009. DK-Tucht. A DK-Tucht is a Klingon dagger. The knife has 3 blades, a main blade with a cutout in the center, and 2 smaller blades on either side. In some models, these side blades are spring-loaded and can pop out into position and close up for storage. In other models, the blades are fixed. It also features a pommel studded with blunt spikes. The DK-Tucht first appeared in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, and appeared occasionally throughout the following films and television series. The knife was designed by Gil Hibben. Although the DK-Tucht appeared in Star Trek III, it was not referred to by its name until Star Trek The Next Generation. Kulach. Similar to the DK-Tucht, the kulach is the ceremonial weapon of an assassin. A kulach is designed to do considerable damage to internal organs, by Klingon standards, thus making it an extremely lethal weapon. The kulach is featured in the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Sins of the Father, when Worf's brother, Kurn, is stabbed. And in the Star Trek Voyager episode Real Life, where the Doctor's simulated son prepares for the kulach ceremony. It is known in the real world as the Phoenix-type knife. Mek'leth. A mek'leth is the Klingon short sword that appears in several episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine and in the film Star Trek First Contact. Designed by Dan Curry, it consists of a short, thick, curved blade with a metal guard extending back parallel with a grip to protect the hand. Worf is the most commonly seen user of the mechlith, owning one and using it several times, including in hand-to-hand combat against Borg drones in First Contact. Romulan equals. Terralon, a Romulan polearm, similar to a trident with retractable blades. It appears in the 2009 Star Trek reboot and is used by the renegade miner Nero. In the Countdown comic, Nero's weapon is revealed to be the De Bruin Terralon, an ancient Romulan artifact that symbolized the Empire's power. It is traditionally held by the presiding praetor. A similar weapon, resembling an axe, was also used by a member of Nero's crew. While widely considered to also be a Terralon, the weapon has yet to be confirmed as one by an official source. Vulcan equals. Lerpa. A lerpa is a Vulcan weapon consisting of a wooden staff a little over a meter in length, with a semicircular blade at one end and a metal bludgeon on the other. It is similar to the monk's spade and the pugil stick. Captain James T. Kirk and Spock used lerpas when they fought for possession of T'Pring during Spock's Ponfar ritual in Amok Time. Soldiers sent after Jonathan Archer and T'Pol fought with lerpas because Vulcan's Forge region makes conventional energy weapons useless. Orhenwoon. An Orhenwoon is a Vulcan catch-strangle weapon, similar in principle to the Earth-Roman gladiator's cast net. The multi-strapped weapon uses weights on the ends of the straps, like bowlers, to entangle, stun, or cut the target, and the application of tying action and wrapping can restrict the breathing of the target, asphyxiating the victim. Other equals. Ashan Tor. In the Enterprise episode United, Andorian Commander Thylik Shran and the NX-2001's Captain Jonathan Archer, as a second for a Tellarite officer who kills Talos, Shran's chief tactical officer and lover, engage in an Andorian Asham duel. The weapon used is the Ashan Tor, an Andorian ice mining blade. The handheld blade of the Ashan Tor is about 20 centimeters from end to end, and resembles a Near-Nupiat Ular blade from Alaska, but in a one-piece all-metal design instead of having a separate wooden handle. Mortires. In the TOS episode The Cloud Minders, mortires and thongs are mining tools used as martial weapons by the Troglyte miners, and apparently the ruling class is also trained with these weapons, as Plus's challenges Kirk to hand-to-hand combat, asking, "Are you as brave with a mortar as with a phaser?" Kirk responds, "Both will kill." Glavin. In the TNG episode Code of Honor, the Ligonians have deep traditions of fighting with a poison-tipped hand weapon called a glavin. It is a large glove with a recurved claw at the end, and covered with dozens of spines, strongly resembling a scorpion's tail sting. In several episodes, Worf is seen displaying one in his quarters, most likely the same one used by Lieutenant Tashiya. Subspace weapons. Subspace weapons are a class of directed energy weapons that directly affect subspace. The weapons can produce actual tears in subspace, and are extremely unpredictable. These weapons were banned under the Second Khitomer Accord. The Sonar equipped their vessels with these types of weapons. Isolytic burst equals. Sonar vessels carried and used isolytic burst weapons, a type of subspace weapon. They were seen using this weapon against the Enterprise in Star Trek, Insurrection. The Enterprise was only able to escape the weapon's effect by ejecting its warp core and detonating it to seal a subspace rift. Tricobalt devices equals. The tricobalt warhead is a subspace weapon whose high-yield detonations can tear holes in subspace. Tricobalt devices are not a standard armament of Federation vessels and yields are calculated in Tira Cochranes, indicating that its mechanism is somewhat similar to the general reaction in a warp field. USS Voyager uses a pair of tricobalt devices to destroy the Caretaker array in the Star Trek Voyager pilot episode, Caretaker, and such a device was used against Voyager in the episode Blink of an Eye. A tricobalt warhead was also used by the Tholians in the Star Trek Enterprise episode In a Mirror, Darkly. They detonated a tricobalt warhead inside the gravity well of a dead star. The explosion created an interphasic rift, which they used to lure the Federation starship USS Defiant from another universe. In TOS, A Taste of Armageddon, the Armenian Union classified the USS Enterprise as destroyed when it was hit by virtual tricobalt satellites. In DS9, Trials and Tribulations, Darwin plants a tricobalt explosive in a dead Tribble in an attempt to kill Kirk. The games Star Trek, Armada and Star Trek, Armada 2 have ships armed with tricobalt devices for artillery support. The Federation Steamrunner class, the Klingon Chickbee-class bird of prey, the Romulan Raptor-class warbird, and the Borg Harbinger are all capable of using them. The workings of the weapon is unknown but theorized is the use of Cobalt-60. Other weapons Mantometric guided charges around stardate 43995, the Borg used this weapon to drive the USS Enterprise, NCC 1701D, from the Paulson Nebula. This shortly leads to the abduction of Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Multikinetic neutronic mines during Season 4, Episode 1 of Star Trek, Voyager, Captain Janeway consults with Borg Representative 7 of 9 on how to destroy Species 8472. Janeway calls 7 of 9's multikinetic neutronic mine a weapon of mass destruction, following up on a statement from Tuvok that it would affect an entire star system, destroying innocent worlds. The mine's 5 million isoton yield can disperse Borg nanoprobes across a 5-light-year range. Dreadnought Dreadnought was a Cardassian self-guided missile, containing 1,000 kilograms of matter, and another 1,000 of antimatter. Tuvok describes this as enough to destroy a small moon. Although described as a self-guided missile, in practice Dreadnought functions much like an autonomous starship, and it even had life support capability on board. It possesses shields, phasers, a complement of quantum torpedoes, a Thorin shock emitter, a plasma wave weapon, engines capable of reaching at least warp 9, and a sophisticated computer AI. It appears in the Voyager episode of the same name. It had been captured by the Maquis due to a failed detonator and reprogrammed to attack its original creators. It was dragged into the Delta Quadrant in much the same manner as Voyager, and when unable to resolve the unforeseen situation it locked onto a planet that was similar to the one it was programmed to target, but which was inhabited by innocents. Dreadnought was equipped with an exceptionally sophisticated artificial intelligence, capable of paranoia to a certain degree, as when reprogrammer Blana Torres attempted to prevent it from destroying the innocent planet, it came to the conclusion that she had been captured by her Cardassian enemies and forced to make up a story to prevent the attack. It then pretended to follow her commands and shut down, only to reactivate and continue its mission once she was no longer aboard. Series 5 Long-Range Tactical Armor Unit similar in purpose to the Cardassian Dreadnought, the tactical armor units are self-guided missiles with sophisticated artificial intelligence. They are much smaller than Dreadnought, being only a few feet in length, and while nowhere near as powerful, they are nonetheless classified as weapons of mass destruction, capable of destroying everything in a 200-kilometer radius with a highly focused antimatter explosion. Their coordination and control is done through a strategic command matrix, analogous to a nuclear control network of the type used by the United States. Each one possesses shielding, warp drive of indeterminate speed, and a sentient, genius-level artificial intelligence program to do whatever is necessary to reach their targets and detonate. They can detect and prevent tampering, are intelligent enough to find a way past almost any obstacle, and can win engagements even when outnumbered. They were created by a Delta Quadrant race called the Druoda, and the devices were greatly feared for their endurance and tenacity. Q firearms Q firearms were used in the Q Civil War by the Voyager crew to compensate against the infinite power of the Q in the Grey. They are depicted as front-loading muskets, to fit with the American Civil War theme used by the Q Continuum as a concession to the human character's limited perceptions. Presumably, their actual form would be as incomprehensible to non-Q as the Continuum itself. The use of the weapons caused supernovae as a side effect in normal reality. They are arguably the most powerful weapons ever wielded by any humanoid species, as indicated by their ability to injure the otherwise invulnerable Q. Red matter In the 2009 Star Trek reboot, red matter was developed on Vulcan before 2387. When even a droplet is ignited an unstable singularity is formed, As a result, it had to be stored in a protective chamber. The red matter was originally to be used to save the Romulan homeworld from a volatile supernova, but the design was finished too late to prevent Romulus' destruction. Upon capture in the past by the Romulan Nero, it was used as a planet-destroying doomsday weapon. Used in conjunction with a plasma drill which bored a hole almost to the core of a planet, a small amount of red matter would be activated at the bottom of the drilling site, creating a black hole in the heart of the planet that would tear it apart from within. Red matter was thus used to destroy an alternate Vulcan, then ultimately destroyed Nero's ship, the Narada, along with all remaining technology from his ship, and all of the remaining red matter. References. External links, Weapons at Memory Alpha.